He knocked 3 times. No answer. He could hear voices inside, laughter, the sound of a television. The smell of food cooking drifted through the crack under the door, food being made in the kitchen he paid for. He knocked again, harder this time. The laughter stopped. Footsteps. The door swung open, and his own brother looked him dead in the eyes and said 6 words that shattered something deep inside him. "We don't have anything for you." Then the door closed, right in his face. And Daniel Cooper, a man worth $43 million, stood alone on the porch of his childhood home, in a torn jacket and dirty boots, with tears burning the back of his eyes. But here is what nobody knew yet. Daniel had planned this moment for months. And what he discovered that night didn't just break his heart. It completely changed the rest of his life in a way that nobody, not even Daniel himself, ever saw coming. If you've ever trusted the wrong people, if you've ever loved someone who only loved what you could give them, stay right here, because this story will hit you somewhere deep. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. Subscribe right now because we tell true-to-life stories that will move you, shake you, and remind you what really matters. Hit the like button if you believe that loyalty means everything. Let's go. To understand what happened on that porch, we have to go back. Way back. To a small town called Millfield, Ohio. Population just over 2,000 people, 1 gas station, 1 diner, and more broken dreams than you could count. Daniel Cooper grew up in a small yellow house on the edge of town. The paint was always peeling, the porch always creaked, and the refrigerator was always almost empty. His father, Robert Cooper, worked at the steel mill 6 days a week. His hands were rough like tree bark. His back was always hurting, but he never complained, not once. He just came home, kissed Daniel's mother on the forehead, sat down at the table, and thanked God for whatever was on the plate, even when it wasn't much. Daniel's mother, Carol, was the kind of woman who could make $1 stretch like a rubber band. She sewed patches onto Daniel's jeans so the other kids wouldn't notice the holes. She made soup from scratch and called it fancy stew, so Daniel and his younger brother Tommy and his sister Becky would feel special instead of poor. She was magic like that. Daniel was the oldest, and he felt the weight of that every single day. By the time he was 12 years old, Daniel was mowing lawns after school to bring home extra money. By 14, he was washing dishes at the diner on weekends. By 16, he had a savings account, small but his, built with his own 2 hands. While other kids were playing video games and sleeping in on Saturdays, Daniel was working. Not because he had to, because he had made himself a promise. He had stood in that kitchen one night, the night the electricity got cut off, the night his mom lit candles and pretended it was romantic, the night he heard his father crying quietly in the bedroom thinking nobody could hear, and Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He said, "I will never let my family go without again." That promise became the engine of his entire life. Daniel graduated high school and got a partial scholarship to a state university 2 hours away. He worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. He slept 4 hours a night. He ate peanut butter sandwiches for months straight. But he studied harder than anyone around him. He wasn't the smartest kid in the room. He knew that. But he was the most relentless. He would read the same chapter 10 times until it made sense. He would stay in the library until it closed. He would ask questions that embarrassed him because he needed to understand. His roommate used to joke that Daniel didn't have blood in his veins. He had ambition. He wasn't wrong. After college, Daniel moved to Chicago. He started at the bottom of a logistics company, sorting packages, tracking shipments, making barely enough to rent a tiny studio apartment where the heat didn't always work. But Daniel was watching, learning, studying every single layer of the business. Within 3 years, he had worked his way up to a management position. Within 5, he had saved enough to start his own small freight company with 1 truck and a business plan he had written by hand in a notebook. People told him it was too risky. People told him the market was too competitive. People told him to be grateful for what he had and stop reaching. Daniel smiled, nodded, and kept going. Because he had never stopped hearing his father's quiet crying in that dark bedroom. That sound lived inside him like a heartbeat. The freight company grew. Slowly at first, then faster, then like wildfire. Daniel had a gift for seeing what others missed: inefficiencies, better routes, smarter systems. He reinvested every dollar back into the business. He hired carefully. He treated his workers like they mattered because he remembered what it felt like when nobody treated you like you did. By the time he was 34 years old, Daniel Cooper's company had contracts with some of the biggest retailers in the country. He was worth more money than the entire town of Millfield, Ohio had probably ever seen in one place. He bought a house in the suburbs of Chicago, a real house, with a real yard, and a refrigerator so full that sometimes he would just open the door and stand there for a moment, not to get something, just to look at it. Just to feel something he never felt as a boy. Safety. But success has a strange way of changing the people around you, even if it doesn't change you. Back in Millfield, word had spread fast about Daniel's money. His brother Tommy, who had bounced from job to job his whole adult life, started calling more often. At first it was casual, catching up, but then the requests started. Small ones at first. A few $100s for a car repair, then $1,000 for rent, then $5,000 because there was a business opportunity that Tommy just needed a little help getting started. Daniel gave it, every time, because that's what you do for family, because he remembered the promise he made in that dark kitchen. His sister Becky had married a man named Gary who had very big dreams and very small follow-through. Gary was always one investment away from striking it rich, and that investment always seemed to need Daniel's money to get started. Daniel gave that too, quietly, without making them feel small. His mother, Carol, was still the same woman she had always been, grateful for every phone call, proud of her son in a way that made his chest tight. She never asked for a single thing, so Daniel made sure she never needed to. He paid off her house. He made sure her heating bill was never a problem. He sent her on a trip to see her sister in Florida because she had always wanted to go and never gone. But his father, Robert, strong, quiet Robert with the rough hands, had passed away 2 years before Daniel's company really took off. That was the wound that never fully healed. His father never got to see it. Never got to know that the little boy who heard him crying in the dark had kept his promise, had kept it for both of them. Daniel would have traded half his fortune just for one phone call. As the years went on, something started to shift. The calls from Tommy and Gary became less like family and more like business transactions. There was always a reason, always an emergency, always something. Daniel started noticing that when he visited Millfield, nobody asked how he was doing. Nobody asked what his life was like, or what he was working on, or whether he was happy. They asked what he was driving. They asked about the house. They asked if he was investing in anything new. At Christmas one year, Tommy gave a toast at dinner. He raised his glass and said, "To Danny, the golden goose of the Cooper family." Everyone laughed. Daniel laughed too. But later that night, lying in his childhood bedroom, he stared at the ceiling and felt something cold settle in his chest. Golden goose. Not a brother, not a son, not a person. Azores. He tried to shake it off. He told himself he was being too sensitive. These were his people. They loved him. Of course they did. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. The idea came to him on a Tuesday morning in March. He was sitting in his office in Chicago, looking at his phone, reading a text from Tommy asking for money for the fourth time in 6 weeks, this time for a sure thing sports betting system, when something inside Daniel just went very quiet and very clear. He thought, what if I didn't have the money anymore? What if everything was gone? Would they still call? Would they still come around? Would they still want to sit at the same table? Or was Daniel Cooper, the person, the brother, the son, only valuable to them because of what was in his bank account? He needed to know. Not to punish anyone, not out of anger. He needed to know the truth, the way you need air when you've been underwater too long. So he made a plan. He told Tommy he had made a terrible investment, that the company had taken on too much debt, that he was in serious trouble financially and might lose everything. He told Becky and Gary the same thing. He called each of them separately, kept his voice steady but cracked just enough to sound real. He said he was embarrassed, that he was scared, that he might need to come home for a little while to figure things out. Then he waited. Tommy's response came in a text 2 hours later. "That's rough, man. Let me know if you need anything." That was it. No call, no "I'm coming to Chicago, are you okay?" No "Hey, what happened, walk me through it." Just "That's rough, man." Becky didn't respond for 3 days. When she finally did, she called briefly to say that Gary's business was going through a tough time too, and that things are really tight right now for everyone. She didn't ask a single question about Daniel. Daniel sat with that for a long time. Then he made a second decision. He would go home, in person, and he would not look like a millionaire. He would look like a man who had lost everything. He wanted to see, with his own eyes, how they treated him when there was nothing left to take. He drove to Millfield in an old 2003 Ford pickup truck he had borrowed from one of his employees. He wore jeans with a real tear in the knee, a jacket that had seen better days, boots with worn soles. He hadn't shaved in 2 weeks. He looked exactly like the kind of man that the world had chewed up and spat out. He pulled up to the house, his mother's house, the one he had paid off, and sat in the truck for a moment. He took a breath. He walked up the porch steps. He knocked. And you already know what happened next. His own brother opened the door, looked at him like a stranger, and said 6 words. "We don't have anything for you." The door closed. Daniel stood there. He didn't move for a full minute. Then something happened that he did not expect. His legs started shaking. Not from anger, from grief. Because somewhere deep down, even after everything, even after the cold text and the 3-day silence, some part of Daniel had still believed they would come through. That when the chips were down, when he looked like he needed something instead of giving something, the love would show up. It didn't. He walked back to the truck and sat inside in the dark for a long time. But here is where this story turns. Here is where everything changes. Because there was one person who didn't know Daniel was coming. One person who never got a call, never got a text, never heard the story about the failed investment. His mother, Carol. She had been at a neighbor's house that evening when Daniel arrived. She had no idea he was there. Daniel was about to start the truck and drive away when the front door of the house opened. And there she was. Carol Cooper, 67 years old, walking up the path with a grocery bag in each hand, wearing the same old green coat she had worn for 15 years because she said it still had warmth in it, and there was no reason to throw away something that still had warmth in it. She looked up and saw the old truck. Then she looked at the man sitting inside it. She stopped walking. Daniel rolled down the window. And his mother, without hesitation, without one single moment of confusion or pause, dropped both grocery bags right there on the path, walked straight to the truck, reached through the window and wrapped both arms around her son's neck. She held on. She didn't say, "What happened to your money?" She didn't say, "Why do you look like that?" She didn't say anything. She just held on. And Daniel, 40 years old, worth $43 million, a man who had built something from nothing, a man who had held himself together through everything, broke completely. He cried like a child, like the boy who used to lie awake, listening to his father in the dark. And his mother just held on tighter. When she finally pulled back, she looked at his face unshaved, tired, wearing torn clothes, and she said, "You come inside. I'm going to make you something to eat." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just, "You come inside. I'm going to make you something to eat." Because that was Carol Cooper's love language. That had always been her love language. She fed people. She fed them when they were struggling. She fed them when they were celebrating. She fed them when words weren't enough. Some people show love with words. Carol showed it with food on the table and arms that never let go. Daniel went inside. Tommy and Becky were in the living room. When they saw Daniel walk through the door with their mother, the energy shifted immediately. Tommy sat up straighter. Becky's eyes went a little wide. They started talking fast, asking questions, acting warm, offering to get him something to drink. Daniel watched them. He watched the way their eyes kept moving over him, trying to read the situation, trying to figure out what version of Daniel this was, what this meant for them. And he felt something in that moment that surprised him. He didn't feel angry. He felt sad. Profoundly, quietly sad. Not for himself. For them. Because what kind of life is that, to see your brother and immediately start calculating what he's worth to you? What kind of prison is that to live inside? He sat down at the kitchen table. His mother put a bowl of soup in front of him, made from scratch, the same recipe she had made his whole life, and sat down across from him. And Daniel looked at her face. Really looked at it. The lines around her eyes, the gray in her hair, the way her hands still moved with such quiet purpose even now. He thought about his father, Robert, how he never got to see any of this. And Daniel made a decision right there, at that kitchen table, in the house he grew up in, wearing torn clothes and holding a warm bowl of soup. He was done pretending. He looked across the table at Tommy and Becky, who were sitting close now, attentive now that they didn't know what was happening. And he told them the truth. All of it. He told them about the test. He told them about the fake story of the failed investment. He told them about driving the old truck, about knocking on the door and hearing Tommy's voice say those 6 words. He told them everything. The room went completely silent. Becky's face went red. Tommy looked at the floor. And then Daniel said something that nobody in that room expected, least of all himself. He said, "I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm not telling you this because I want an apology. I'm telling you this because I love you and I'm tired of pretending that everything is fine when it isn't." He paused. Then he said, "I miss my family, not the people who call when they need money. My family. The people who used to sit at this table together and laugh and fight and eat bad soup and love each other anyway." He looked at his mother. "She's still here," he said. "She never changed, not once." Carol was quiet, but her eyes were full. Tommy opened his mouth, closed it again. And then, slowly, like something very heavy was being lifted, his brother said something that Daniel had not heard in years. He said, "I'm sorry, Danny." Not "I'm sorry, but." Not "I'm sorry, it's just that." Just "I'm sorry, Danny." And you could hear in his voice that he meant it, that somewhere underneath all the years of asking and taking and drifting, the brother was still in there, just buried. Now here comes the part of the story that nobody saw coming. Not Tommy, not Becky, not even Carol. Remember how Daniel had told Tommy and Becky that he had lost everything, that the company was in serious financial trouble. What Daniel had never told any of them, not even his mother, was that 3 weeks before this night, he had made a decision. He had already changed his will. Months before the test, before the fake story, before the truck and the torn jacket, Daniel had been talking to his lawyer about what to do with his money, because Daniel had no children. He had no wife. He had poured everything into the company, and somewhere along the way, the personal life had gotten away from him. He had struggled with that, quietly, the way he struggled with everything alone in the dark without telling anyone. And he had decided, before any of this happened, that when he was gone, the majority of his estate would not go to Tommy. It would not go to Becky and Gary. He had set up a foundation in his father's name. The Robert Cooper Foundation. For kids in small towns like Millfield, who were exactly where Daniel once was, working twice as hard as everyone around them, with nothing but a promise to themselves and a family who needed them to keep it. Scholarships, mentorship, a real chance. That was where the money was going. That had been decided long before this night. But what he told them now, sitting at that kitchen table, was something he had never planned to tell anyone yet. He looked at his mother and he said, "Mom, I named it after Dad." Carol put her hand over her mouth. He never got to see it, but everyone who gets helped by it will know his name. Robert Cooper, a man who worked with his hands and never once complained and never once made us feel like we were poor, because he made us feel like we were loved. The kitchen was completely silent, except for the sound of Carol crying. Not sad crying. The other kind. The kind that comes when something that has been hurting for a long time finally gets healed. Tommy and Becky heard about the will that night too. There was a moment of something on their faces. You can guess what it was. But then Tommy nodded slowly, and he said something that shocked Daniel more than any of it. He said, "That's the right call, Danny. That's what Dad would have wanted." And Daniel believed him. Because Tommy said it the way a man says something true, not the way a man says something because he wants something back. It was a small thing, but it was real. And sometimes real and small is worth more than big and hollow. Daniel stayed in Millfield for a week. He slept in his old bedroom. He ate at the table every night. He helped his mother with groceries and sat with her in the evenings watching television and listening to her talk about the neighbors and the garden and all the small, ordinary things that make a life. And for the first time in a very long time, longer than he could even say, Daniel Cooper felt something settle inside him. Not the satisfaction of a deal closed or a contract signed. Something older than that. Something that smelled like soup and felt like arms that don't let go. He thought about his father every single day of that week. He thought about that promise made in a dark kitchen by a 12-year-old boy who couldn't stand to hear his father cry. He had kept it. He had kept it in every way a person can keep a promise. The money, the foundation, the name on the door. Robert Cooper. Kept. Before he left, he sat on the porch with Tommy. Just the two of them, like when they were kids. It was cold, Ohio cold, the kind that gets into your bones. But neither of them went inside. Tommy said, "I know I've been a bad brother, Danny." Daniel said, "You've been a scared one, there's a difference." Tommy looked at him. Daniel said, "We all got scared by being poor. We just handled it different. You started looking for shortcuts. I started working. Neither one of us was wrong to be scared. We were just kids." Tommy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "How do you not hate me?" And Daniel looked out at the street where they used to ride bikes, where their father used to park his truck after the long drive home from the mill, where their mother used to stand in the doorway calling them in for dinner. And he said, "Because you're still my brother, and because I'm tired of losing people." That week changed something. Not just for Daniel. For all of them. Becky called Gary from the house and had a long, private conversation. Nobody knows exactly what was said, but Gary's big investment ideas got a lot quieter after that, and Becky started calling Daniel more, not to ask for things, just to talk. Tommy got a job, a real one, at a logistics company of all places. He called Daniel for advice sometimes, not for money, for advice. And Daniel gave it freely, gratefully, like a man who had been waiting a long time to be needed for something other than his wallet. And Carol kept making soup. She made it every time Daniel came home, which became more often, much more often. He would drive down from Chicago on long weekends sometimes and just sit in that kitchen and watch her cook. He wouldn't check his phone. He wouldn't think about contracts or logistics or quarterly reports. He would just sit there, in the house with the creaking porch and the peeling paint that he had never let her repaint because she said she liked it, because it was home. And it was enough. It was more than enough. The Robert Cooper Foundation launched the following spring. At the small ceremony in Millfield, held in the school gymnasium where Daniel once ate a free lunch because his family couldn't afford the full price, he stood at a podium in front of about 200 people. He looked out at the crowd. He saw his mother in the front row, wearing the green coat. He saw Tommy next to her, sitting straight, clapping harder than anyone. He saw empty chairs too, the ones that should have had his father in them. And he said, "My father worked his whole life in a steel mill in this town. He never made it rich. He never drove a fancy car or took a vacation or bought himself anything nice. But every single day he came home. And when he sat down at that table, we knew we were loved. We knew we were safe. We knew that whatever happened in the world outside, inside those walls, we were enough." He paused. That feeling, that is the most valuable thing I have ever been given. It cost him nothing, and it gave me everything. This foundation is my attempt to give that same thing to kids who are sitting right now in dark kitchens in small towns, making promises to themselves. He looked down for a moment. "Dad, I kept my promise. I hope you can see it." Not a dry eye in the gymnasium. Not one. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about money. It is not about who gets the inheritance, or who said what, or who closed the door. It is about a question that every single one of us has to answer eventually. Who are you when there is nothing to gain? Carol Cooper answered that question without even knowing she was being asked it. She dropped her groceries and held her son because that is who she was, always had been, always would be. No test required. No circumstances needed. That is the rarest kind of love. And if you have someone in your life who loves you like that, without conditions, without calculation, without checking your bank account first, hold on to them. Hold on with everything you have. Because Daniel Cooper had $43 million. But the thing that saved him, the thing that kept him human, that kept him whole, that made every single dollar worth earning, was an old woman in a green coat who dropped her groceries. That's it. That's the whole story. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone you love, someone you've maybe been taking for granted, someone who has always been there without asking for anything in return, share this video with them right now. Not tomorrow, right now. Because they deserve to know that you see them. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do it. We tell stories like this because the world needs more of them. Stories that remind us what we're really here for. Like this video if Daniel's story hits somewhere real. And leave a comment below, tell us about your Carol. Tell us about the person in your life who would drop everything for you, no questions asked. We read every single one. Thank you for watching until the end. That means everything.